Hello, this is Susan Woods, your Black Lives Matter fraud investigator. Thank you so much for your time. This is episode number 8 of the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation Form 990 analysis. And in this episode, we will focus on part 7, which deals with compensation. How much did the employees and other members of the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation get paid in the year 2020? So let's take a look. First, I want to talk about what is the Form 990. The Form 990 information return, or Form 990, is an annual report the IRS requires all 501c3 nonprofit organizations to submit to provide information about revenues and expenses for the prior year. So you have to tell the IRS how you used the tax-free money that people donated to the organization or the grant funding that you received for the organization. You have to explain how you used the tax-free money in a nutshell. The type of Form 990 nonprofit organizations submit depends on the type of nonprofit organization and the amount of revenues and assets the nonprofit organization has on record. There are 3 major types. You have the Form 990, the Form 990EZ, and the Form 990N e-postcard. Those are the 3 major types. There are a total of 5 types. Form 990s are due by the 15th day of the 5th month after the fiscal year ends. For example, if the fiscal year ends on December the 31st, then the Form 990 is due by May 15th of the next year. And finally, the primary purpose of the Form 990 is to demonstrate transparency and accountability to the public. All nonprofit organizations should want, or the administrators of all nonprofit organizations should want to demonstrate transparency and accountability to the public. Because after all, they are receiving tax-free money to benefit the community. So the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation red flags. The purpose of analyzing the Form 990 information return that the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation submitted for fiscal year 2020 is to point out the red flags that I identify when I examine the Form 990 information return. I've decided to divide the analysis among episodes. So I decided to create episodes for each part of the Form 990, because if I try to share the information for the entire Form 990 or look for red flags for the entire Form 990, the video would be too long. It would be absolutely too long. So I decided to divide my analysis using episodes. So in this episode, this is episode number 8, we're going to focus on part 7, which is compensation of officers, directors, trustees, key employees, highest compensated employees, and independent contractors. This is going to be the discussion of this episode. We're going to talk about how people were paid, how much they were paid, when they were paid, why they were paid. All of those things are going to be discussed in this episode because, after all, the money used to pay people in fiscal year 2020 came from people who donated in the wake of the George Floyd murder. The majority of the money that the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation received in 2020 came in between after his death in May until approximately the end of September, when it started stemming off. But the organization admits to raising or receiving $90 million during that time frame. So this episode is going to talk about who received money in terms of compensation during that time. So I'm going to switch over now I'm going to pause my screen and I'm going to switch over to the actual Form 990 information return so that we can take a look at how the money was divided or shared or used during that time frame so that we can see who was paid, during that time. So here we are. We're looking at the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation Form 990 for 2020. And this is public inspection. So again, whenever an organization has 501c3 status, they need to make their Form 990s available for public inspection. That's a requirement. So we are looking at Part 7, which is compensation of officers, directors, trustees, key employees, highest compensated employees, and independent contractors. Okay? Now, as I always advise in each episode, when you're looking at a Form 990, always pull up the instructions for that year's Form 990 so that you can read and get an understanding of how the CPA or whomever completed the Form 990, how and why they answered questions the way that they did. So I'm going to switch over to the 2020 instructions for this particular section of the Form 990. And again, we are talking about Part 7, compensation of officers, directors, trustees, key employees, highest compensated employees, and independent contractors. And this gives you more information about what we are looking for or how we should answer the questions. So we're going to just read, I'm just going to read a little bit about this because this section is, in my opinion, complex. To be completely transparent myself, when I operated my nonprofit organization, and we generated revenues that exceeded $50,000, which meant we had to use another level of Form 990, either the Form 990 or the Form 990EZ. I did not complete the Form 990s. We hired a CPA firm that specialized in 501c3 nonprofit um, um, accounting processes in order to complete our Form 990. In other words, I relied on the experts. I didn't rely because I don't have a keen interest in learning the technicalities of a complex Form 990. So we just decided, when I say we, the board decided and gave me approval to hire an outside CPA firm to complete our Form 990 for us. But when we're talking about the Part 7 here, it says check the box in the heading of Part 7 if Schedule O, Form 990 or Form 990EZ, contains any information pertaining to this part. Now, a Schedule O is an attachment or an additional document that you would include with your Form 990s to provide narrative information or to explain in more detail entries in the Form 990. That's what a Schedule O is used for. Overview. Form 990.7 requires a listing of the organization's current or former officers, directors, trustees. Now, officers, directors, trustees, you can categorize those groups of people as the board of directors because those are the different terms that people use to describe people who serve on the board of directors. And then you have the key employees, and then you have the highest compensated employees, and then current independent contractors and reporting of certain compensation information relating to such persons. So each one of these um, terms that's bolded here, they have different definitions that you need to have a clear understanding of so that you will then know where to enter data that pertains to these different roles. That's important to understand the definitions of each role. So I'm going to scroll down just a little bit so that we can see more information about that. And again, I'm not going to elaborate on all of this information because to me it's complex, which is why we hired the experts to complete our Form 990. But a key employee is a person that earns over $150,000 of reportable compensation. So that's the definition of a key employee, a person who earns over $150,000 of reportable compensation. Now, the highest compensated employee, when you talk about that, that would be a person who earned $100,000, over $100,000 of reportable compensation. Okay. And that includes the current and former employees. So, like I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail about this information, but once again, you can always come to the instructions to get definitions of terms that are used in the Form 990. And I'm just scrolling down just to let you see how much information is available for you if you want to do a deep dive into understanding the definitions of those key terms. And then one other thing that I like about the IRS is they provide examples, scenario-based examples to help you really understand and retain the information. That's important. But once again, this is something that we contracted out. We did not, or I did not complete the Form 990 for our organization at all. When our organization started earning less than the amount required to complete the Form 990 EZ, then I started completing it. For example, I can complete the Form 990 in e-postcard because it's for organizations that generate $50,000 or less in a fiscal year. Now I can complete that type of Form 990, but anything other higher than $50,000, I cannot do it. So again, you see as I scroll down, this is a lot of information about that one section, part 7. All of this is pertaining to part 7, and I've been scrolling for quite some time now. So I just wanted you to see how detailed this information is. And if you wanted to, again, do a deep dive, you can certainly come back and look at this information in more detail. So I'm going to close this out now and return back to the actual Form 990 itself so that we can take a look and we can see who was paid and how much they were paid in fiscal year 2020 when the organization admits to generating $90 million. So here we are, we're back to the Form 990. And I'm going to scroll down so we can get started looking at the details of this information. So we're going to look at which category is this. This is the first category. This is Section A, officers, directors, trustees, key employees, and highest compensated employees. Remember those definitions that we just learned about. So in this section, we have number 1, a person named Kaylee Scales. She was the former managing director of the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation. She's listed here as not working any hours per week. It says average hours per week. They listed 0 here for her. She is a former employee, and her salary was $139,625. Now, that's red flag number 1 for me because if you work 0 hours, how were you paid? Or why were you paid $139,625? The next entry in this first area, the first section, is Patrice Coolers. Now, we know Patrice. She's the founder and executive director of the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, and her average hours per week was 40. She's listed as an individual trustee or director, and she's also listed as an officer. And remember, I said trustee, director, and officer comprise the board. Those are just terms that are used to describe the people who serve on the board. And she has zero reportable compensation, probably because of the way she listed herself as a board member, and board members generally don't get paid. Some do. It depends on the organization. That's a whole nother conversation. But she listed zero. Okay. So remember, Charlamagne Bowers, her friend, signed off on this Form 990 information return. He's the secretary during this time frame of the board of directors, and he signed off on this information. Just put that in your back pocket. We'll come back to it later. So I'm going to scroll down because there are no more entries um, for this category of people. So we'll just scroll down and come to the subtotal. The subtotal for this section is 139,625, and that's Kaylee Skill's salary. And the total is the same because Patrice Concool is listed zero as her salary, which I find just to be a little bit strange because we all know that she did get money out of this organization. We know that. So let's go to number 3. Did the organization list any former officer, director, trustee, key employee, or highest compensated employee on line 1A? If yes, then we will complete a Schedule J for such individual. And the answer is yes. So that means later on, we will be looking for a Schedule J to provide more information. Schedules just elaborate on the entries. So a Schedule J will tell us more about Kaylee Scales and why she was paid. 4, for any reason listed on line 1A, is the sum of reportable compensation and other compensation from the organization and related organizations greater than $150,000? And the answer is no for that. It did not exceed $150. The total didn't. The total was 139,625. 5, did any person listed on line 1A receive or accrue compensation from any unrelated organization or individual for services rendered to the organization? And the answer for that question is no. So now we're going to go down to section B, right here, section B, independent contractors. Now, what is an independent contractor? What's the definition for that person? An independent contractor is a person or a business that you hire to do specialized services for your nonprofit organization that you do not observe every day directly. I learned this when I took a class for nonprofit management, for a nonprofit management certificate program for Duke University. Every day, a different person would come in to talk about their area of expertise. So when we started talking about legal issues, a lawyer who specializes in nonprofit organizations clearly explain what an independent contractor is. So, like I said, based on the information I learned from this particular lawyer, an independent contractor, again, is an organization or a person or a company that the nonprofit organization hires to do specialized work that you don't observe like you would if you was an employee. A typical employee, you would supervise their work. You don't supervise the work of independent contractors. Okay. And again, you can go back to the instructions and read the official definition of independent contractors. So let's take a look at the independent contractors that Patrice Concoolers hired during this time. And I said she hired them because she was the only executive director working at that time. As you saw, Kaylee Scales was listed as a former employee. Patrice Concoolers was listed as a founder and executive director. So she had the authority to hire independent contractors during this time frame. So the first independent contractor that she hired was the Bowers Consulting Firm. Now, the name Bowers should be familiar because it is a consulting firm owned by the board secretary, which is Charlamagne Bowers. And Charlamagne Bowers, or the Bowers consulting firm, was paid $2,167,894 for consulting services. And as you can see in description of services, it says see Schedule O. Remember, a Schedule O elaborates or describes the type of services that the Bowers consulting firm provided, because that's what the Schedule O is intended to do. It's intended to elaborate on entries in a Form 990. So if we go to the Schedule O, we should be able to see a full description of the services that the Bowers consulting firm provided for the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation that warranted $2,167,000 and $167,894. Now, the second entry here, Trap Hills LLC. Well, this organization, it says description of services, they provided live production, design, and media for $969,459. Now, Trap Hills LLC is owned by a gentleman named Damon Turner. Damon Turner owns Trap Hills. Now, Damon Turner just so happens to be Patrice Concooler's ex-boyfriend and the father of her son. Again, Trap Hills LLC is owned by Damon, D-A-M-O-N, Turner, T-U-R-N-E-R, who is Patrice Concooler's ex-boyfriend and the father of her son. She paid him $969,459 for live production design and media. That's it. That's it. No more definition about that. No more description about those services because it didn't indicate for us to see Schedule O. So that's all we get. He provided live production, design, and media. Now I have a whole video that I'm going to upload to elaborate more on the fraud that this represents. The next entry in the list is Dewey Square Group LLC. It's communications, IT, and digital. And Patrice Concooler's approved $709,190 for this organization. Now, when I went to his website, it is supposed to be, again, some type of communications organization that's supposed to represent you to the public or something like that. And they provide services for nonprofit organizations and politicians and people who need image management. Then you have the Sadler Strategic Media Company, and Patrice Concooler's approved $696,364 for this company to do media planning and placement. That's all we know about that. And when I went to find out more information about this company, it's closed. It's permanently closed. And then you have Resistance Labs. It's now called Movement Labs, and it provided tech support. That's all we get, tech support, and for $504,000. So we have a total number of independent contractors as 9, including but not limited those listed above who receive more than $100,000 in compensation from the organization. So you might say 9. I only see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exactly. So 4 are listed someplace else. And I'll come back to that later as well. Why not list them all here? Because they're mixed in. Okay, they're mixed in throughout this Form 990 so as to almost hide the information. Because I'll just tell you one person that's hidden in this Form 990 all the way on the Schedule L, and that would be Coolers Protection LLC. Coolers, Cullors, like Patrice Con Coolers, but there's a Coolers Protection LLC. It is owned by Paul Coolers to provide security services. And Paul Coolers is Patrice Con Coolers' brother, biological brother, and she paid him $840,993 for security services. He started his security business on July the 8th, 2020, right in the heart, right in the time frame in which millions of dollars was coming into this organization. Now he is a graffiti artist. That's what he does. That's what he did prior to his sister encouraging him to create this LLC called Coolers Protection Services LLC so that she could then give him $840,993 to provide the services. And this information is, like I said, looks like it's trying to be hidden in this particular Form 990 because you don't see it until you go to Schedule L. So these are red flags. These are red flags. So we have a red flag for Bowers Consulting Firms. We have a red flag for Trap Hills, a red flag for Dewey Square. We have a red flag for Sadler Strategic Media, and then Resistance Lab, and then a red flag because she's hiding her brother's information all the way in a Schedule L within the Form 990. So let's keep going, and I will, of course, come back to that later. So I'm going to scroll down. Oh, I'm sorry. I think I'm done. Excuse me. I don't want to go to the statement of revenue yet. Okay, so we're done. I don't want to go to part 8 yet. I want to stick to part 7. Okay, I get so wrapped up in this information, I lose track of where I am. So let's just summarize. Let's come back. In part 7, we talked about compensation of officers, directors, trustees, key employees, highest compensated employees, and independent contractors. Okay. In section A, we talked about officers, directors, trustees, key employees, and highest compensated employees. In section A. And we talked about Kaylee Scales, former managing director. And I'm going to do a video on Kaylee Scales because, of course, she left this company. But one thing she did that was so funny that you might want to look up, while she was a managing director for the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, she decided to participate in a Ask Me Anything Reddit conversation. I don't know if you're familiar with Reddit or not, but you can have an online discussion where people just ask you anything they want to ask you. So, of course, people asked her about the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, what it stood for, and primarily where the money was going. If you want to look at an example of how someone totally ignores questions from people and avoids answering questions from people when they ask them to ask them anything, that would be a perfect example. She never gave a definitive response when people asked her where the money was going and how the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation was using the money. She was very evasive with answering those questions. So if you want to see something funny, you can go to that. But again, I'm going to upload a video that I've done about Kaylee Scales and about the Reddit interview that she failed miserably conducting. Then we talked about Patrice Coolers, founder and executive director, and how she's working 40 hours a week but not making any money. Then we went down and we talked about independent contractors. And we just talked about the Bowers Consulting Firm, Trap Hills LLC, Dewey Square Group LLC, Sadler Strategic Media Incorporated, and Resistance Labs. Again, I'm going to upload a video about Trap Hills. I'm going to upload a video about the one that's missing from here, which is Paul Coolers, the graffiti artist, which earned $840,000 for security services without absolutely any security services experience. So I'm going to elaborate on that. So I've tabulated, for this section, I tabulated a total of 8 red flags. So I'm going to pause my screen, and thank you so much for your patience. I'm going to pause my screen to go back to the presentation so that I can now update the presentation with the correct number of red flags that I counted while I was going through this information with you. So just one moment as I pull back up the presentation so that you can see that I've updated the red flags accordingly. Okay. So now we're back to the presentation. And again, I'm tracking the red flags that I identify in the Form 990 information return for the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation 2020 information report. So we are on episode number 8, section part 7. And for this one, I tabulated or calculated 8 red flags in this section. So you can see how I've been keeping track of the red flags in the different sections of this Form 990 information return. And I'm going to eventually provide narratives or explanations for each one of the red flags when I finish my investigation or my analysis, rather, this Form 990. I'm going to put information to the side. I'm going to create another column here and just explain what the red flags mean. So thank you so much again for your time and for indulging me with these investigations. I know that this is old news. I get it. This is old news. This happened in June, July, August, September of 2020 after George Floyd died. So it's been over 2 years, and I've been investigating since June of 2020. I wish I had more time to spend on the investigations because I find it intriguing that no one has been arrested. I mean, this is blatant. I mean, they have the audacity, they being Shalimar Bowers and Patrice Concoulers, they have the audacity to put in writing in a Form 990 information return fraudulent information. They have the audacity to say, yes, we cheated. Yes, we misused millions of dollars. Yes, we did. I'm just hoping that someone is investigating this organization. And I believe that the FBI is investigating because you may recall in another video, I did mention there's a feud now between the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation led by Shalimar Bowers and the Black Lives Matter grassroots organization that's led by Medina Abdullah. She has sued him in a court of law in California for misusing funds because she's under the impression that Patrice Concoulers intended for the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation to dissolve and then transfer all of its assets over to the Black Lives Matter grassroots nonprofit organization. I've done a video about that. You can check it out if you want to in the playlist on my YouTube channel. But so according to the court documents, the FBI is investigating the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation. So I haven't seen any results, and we know the FBI is the FBI. They're going to do what they're going to do in their own time. But I'm just hopeful that I'm going to be able to see some arrests. I want to see people in handcuffs because, again, this is very personal for me as someone who operated a nonprofit organization for 10 years and struggled with being able to finance the services that we were offering in the community. This bothers me on a personal level because I know the struggle is real for grassroots 501c3 nonprofit organizations to get money to do the good work that they are honestly trying to do in the community. And then you have this organization to squander $90 million on personal friends, baby daddies, brothers, all of this stuff. It just bothers me. It makes me very, very angry. And so I want to see people in handcuffs because this is a generational impact on Black-led 501c3 nonprofit organizations that's detrimental. It's detrimental to our credibility, to the Black-led organization's credibility. People are going to say, okay, we entrusted the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation with $90 million. What happened? Why should we believe you are going to do the right thing with the money that we invest? So this is not just a fluke. This is a generational impact, negative impact on all Black-led organizations. So that's why it bothers me so much. So yes, this is old news, but I'm going to keep reporting it until something happens, until somebody faces the consequences of their actions. So what's coming up next? Up next is episode number 9. In episode number 9, we're going to talk about Statement of Functional Expenses, Part 9. Statement of Functional Expenses. Thank you so much for your time and have a nice day.